I knew something was wrong the first time he asked me not to hold his hand in public. Not because it shocked me. I'd already learned to read the pauses in his voice, the way his shoulders tensed when someone we knew walked by, but because of how casually he said it, like he was asking me to pass the salt, like it didn't cut straight through my chest. "Not here," he murmured, eyes flicking to the couple behind us in line. "Please." I let go immediately, smiled, nodded, pretended it didn't matter. That's kind of how it started. Me pretending. Him surviving. Let me back up. My name's Theo Mercer, and I've been out since I was 19. Loudly out. Rainbow flag in my bio, bring my boyfriend to family dinners out. It wasn't always easy, but it was done. Finished. A closed chapter I didn't have to keep rereading. Then I met Julian Crow. We worked in the same co-working space downtown. Me freelancing in digital marketing. Him doing something tech-heavy I never fully understood, but pretended I did because it made him smile. We didn't talk much at first. Just nods. The occasional, "Hey," shared glances over bad coffee. Julian had this way of being quietly magnetic. Not flashy, not loud. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, people leaned in. Dark hair always a little unkempt, like he'd run his hand through it one too many times. Soft voice, sharp eyes, the kind of guy you didn't notice at first, and then couldn't stop noticing. Our first real conversation happened in the elevator. It stalled between floors. Classic, right? Emergency lights flicked on. Silence dropped in like a held breath. I made some stupid joke about how this was how horror movies started. He laughed, actually laughed, and something cracked open between us. By the time the elevator started moving again, we were already trading stories. By the end of the week, we were getting lunch together. 2 weeks later, drinks. A month later, he kissed me outside my apartment, hesitant but sure, like he'd been building up to it for years. That should have been the moment everything made sense. Instead, it was the moment the rules started appearing. He never said them outright at first. They just surfaced. He didn't tag me in photos, didn't introduce me as anything specific, didn't correct people when they assumed we were just friends. The first time I asked about it, he rubbed the back of his neck and said, "I'm just not there yet." Not there yet. I told myself that was reasonable. Everyone comes out differently. Different timelines. Different risks. Julian's family was conservative. His job was corporate. He'd spent years building a version of himself that fit neatly into straight expectations. I had empathy. I really did. So I adjusted. I became careful with my affection. I learned which streets he felt safer on, which bars were okay and which were too risky. I stopped posting things, started editing myself without thinking about it. What scared me wasn't that he was closeted. It was how quickly I learned to live inside that closet with him. There were moments, though, tiny dangerous moments, when he forgot to hide. Like the night it rained unexpectedly, and we ran laughing down the street, soaked and breathless. He grabbed my hand then, fingers laced tight, not caring who saw. Or when he fell asleep on my chest during a movie, breathing slow and even, completely unguarded. Those moments felt like oxygen, and they made everything else hurt more. Because every time he pulled away in public, every time he stiffened when someone asked, "So how do you two know each other?" it felt like being reminded of my place. Not secret, but not real enough to be named. I loved him anyway. That's the part people don't like admitting. Love doesn't always wait for fairness. Sometimes it just shows up and says, "Deal with it." The question I didn't know how to answer yet was simple and terrifying. How long can you love someone who only loves you in private? And what happens when being patient starts to feel like disappearing? The first real fight we had wasn't loud. That's what made it worse. We were sitting on my couch, knees barely touching, a half-finished pizza on the table, going cold between us. Some dumb sitcom played in the background, laugh track, echoing at all the wrong moments. Julian was scrolling on his phone, jaw tight. I could tell he was bracing for something, or avoiding it. "You didn't answer me," I said. He looked up. "I thought I did." "No," I replied, keeping my voice even, too even. "You changed the subject." There it was. The thing we'd been circling for weeks. My friend's birthday party. A simple invite. Nothing dramatic. Just a rooftop, some drinks, people who already knew I was gay and wouldn't care who Julian was holding hands with. He set his phone down slowly. Theo. That tone. Careful, preemptive, like he was already apologizing for something he hadn't said yet. I just don't think that's a good idea, he continued. Why? I asked. Be specific. He exhaled through his nose, leaned back. Because I don't want questions. About what? About us. The word us hung there, fragile and undefined. I swallowed. We've been together 6 months. I know. I bring you to my place. My friends see you on my couch, in my bed, in my kitchen at 2 a.m. wearing my hoodie. I know, he repeated, softer now. So what questions are you afraid of? He looked away. And that's when it clicked. Not the first time, maybe, but the clearest. He wasn't scared of questions. He was scared of answers. Julian, I said quietly, do you think I'm asking too much? He turned back to me, eyes earnest, almost pleading. No, I think you're asking at the wrong time. The wrong time. I nodded slowly, like I accepted that. Like it didn't feel like being told to wait indefinitely in a room with no clock. Okay, I said. Then tell me when the right time is. He opened his mouth, closed it. That silence stretched longer than any argument ever could. I stood up, went to the window, stared out at the city lights. People lived entire lives in those windows. Laughed, fought, loved, broke up. Most of them probably weren't negotiating whether they were allowed to exist openly with the person they cared about. Behind me, Julian said my name. I didn't turn around. I need to know something, I said instead. If I weren't out, if I was willing to hide like you, would this be easier for you? He didn't answer right away. That hesitation hurt more than a straight no. I don't want you to hide, he finally said. But you're okay with me shrinking. He stood up then, crossed the space between us. Didn't touch me. Just stood close enough that I could feel his warmth. That's not fair. Neither is this, I said. For a moment, I thought this might be it. The breaking point. The dramatic realization scene people talk about after the fact. Instead, he said, I love you. And I hated myself for how badly I needed to hear that. I love you too, I replied, because it was true. Because love doesn't always show up with conditions. You discover the conditions later. That night, he stayed over. Wrapped around me like always. Protective. Tender. Real in all the ways that mattered when no one else was watching. In the dark, it was easy to believe him. In the dark, we made sense. But the next morning, when we walked out of my building and he instinctively took half a step away from me on the sidewalk, that's when the quiet damage set in. Not explosive. Not obvious. Just the slow erosion of being loved, but never chosen in the light. And I started to wonder something I'd been avoiding for a long time. Was I helping him come out at his own pace? Or was I just teaching him that I'd accept less than I deserved? The thing no one tells you about being the out one in a relationship like that is how lonely it gets, even when you're not alone. Julian would text me good morning every day. He'd remember how I took my coffee. He'd show up when I was sick with soup I didn't ask for and a look on his face like he was scared I might disappear if he blinked too long. He loved me in 1,000 quiet, attentive ways. And yet, I started noticing how often I edited myself before he even asked. I'd be halfway through a story with coworkers and stop short, swapping my boyfriend for someone I'm seeing. I'd instinctively step a little farther away from him when we were out, like my body had learned the choreography better than my brain. The worst part was how natural it started to feel. That's when my friend Maya called me out. We were sitting at a bar I used to love. Low lights, sticky tables, music too loud to think straight. Julian wasn't there. He'd said he was tired, or busy, or something. I stopped cataloging the reasons after a while. Maya watched me ramble for a few minutes, then leaned in and said, "You're smaller lately." I laughed it off. "What does that even mean?" "You used to take up space," she said. Now you keep apologizing for existing." That landed harder than I expected. "I'm fine," I said automatically. She raised an eyebrow. "You love him." "Yes." "And he loves you." "Yes. But he won't stand next to you where people can see it." I didn't answer. She sighed, gentler now. "I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm saying this is costing you more than you're admitting." That night, I went home and stared at the ceiling for a long time after Julian fell asleep. His arm was slung over my waist, possessive even in rest. If anyone had walked in, there would have been no doubt. He wanted me, he chose me, just not where it counted. A week later, something happened that forced the issue. We ran into one of his coworkers at the grocery store. Total accident. No warning. No time to prepare. The guy, Ethan, I think, smiled, waved, walked over. "Julian! Man, fancy seeing you here." Julian straightened instantly. His hand, which had been resting casually on my lower back, dropped away like it'd been burned. "Hey," Julian said, voice a pitch higher. Ethan looked at me. "And you are?" There was a beat. Just one. "This is Theo," Julian said. "A friend." "A friend." I smiled. Because I always smiled. "Nice to meet you," I said, because I was good at this by now. Ethan chatted for another minute, said something about deadlines, then left. The moment he was gone, Julian exhaled like he'd been underwater. "You okay?" he asked. I stared at the apples in front of me. Red, shiny, ordinary. "Do you hear yourself?" I said quietly. He frowned. "What? You didn't even hesitate." He stiffened. "Theo, come on." "No," I interrupted, finally looking at him. "You didn't even hesitate. You didn't check my face. You didn't try to soften it. You just erased me. That's not fair. You introduced me like I was someone you ran into by accident," I said. "Like I don't sleep in your bed. Like I don't know the sound you make when you laugh, for real. People pass by us, carts squeaking, life going on like this wasn't the moment something cracked open." "I panicked," he said. "I wasn't thinking." "That's the problem," I replied. "You never have to think about what this costs me." We left without buying anything. The argument that followed was everything the first one wasn't. Messy, emotional, overdue. He said he felt trapped. I said I felt invisible. He said he was trying. I said I was tired of waiting. At one point he said, "Why can't you just be patient?" And I finally said the thing I'd been swallowing for months. Because patience is starting to look a lot like self-erasure. That shut him up. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. I stood by the door, heart pounding, realizing something terrifying. I wasn't afraid of losing him anymore. I was afraid of losing myself if I stayed like this. "I love you," he said eventually, voice breaking. "I know," I replied, "but love isn't supposed to make you feel like a secret you agreed to keep." We didn't break up that night. But something shifted. For the first time, I stopped cushioning my words to protect him from the truth. And for the first time, he had to sit with the possibility that loving me halfway might mean losing me entirely. The weeks after that fight were strange in a way I didn't have words for yet. Not cold, not distant, just careful. Julian started doing slightly braver things. He'd sit closer to me in cafes. He stopped flinching every time someone walked past. Once, only once, he didn't correct a bartender who said, "You guys together?" That one moment lit me up more than it should have. And that's when I realized how low my bar had sunk. Because I was celebrating crumbs. Meanwhile, the cost kept stacking up in quieter ways. I stopped posting anything personal online. Not because he asked, he never did, but because it was easier than explaining why he was never there. I caught myself avoiding certain friends because they asked questions I didn't want to answer. "How's Julian? Still? You know. When do we get to meet him properly?" Properly. Like he was a concept, not a man who knew the exact spot behind my ear that made my knees weak. One Friday night, we were lying in bed, scrolling mindlessly. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, froze for half a second, then turned the screen away. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just work stuff." I didn't push. I was done playing detective in my own relationship. But later, when he was in the shower, his phone lit up again on the nightstand. I didn't mean to look. I really didn't. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Mom. The message preview read, "So when are we going to meet this girl you're always busy with?" Girl. When Julian came back, towel around his waist, hair damp, I was sitting upright against the headboard, phone in my hand. Not accusing, not shaking, just tired. He saw it immediately. "Oh," he said. "That's new," I replied. "I didn't know I was imaginary and female." He sat down slowly. "Theo." "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. Again. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "God, you really need to work on that pause." "A few months," he admitted. It was easier. Easier." I nodded. "Do you hear how often you say that?" He rubbed his face. I didn't want to lie forever. I just needed time. "Time to do what?" I asked. "Replace me with a version of myself your life can tolerate? That's not fair." "I'm not asking to meet your mother," I said. "I'm asking not to be rewritten." The room felt smaller than usual, like the walls were listening. "My family wouldn't understand," he said quietly. "And what about me?" I shot back. "Do you understand me?" He didn't answer. I slid out of bed, grabbed a hoodie, started pulling on jeans. "What are you doing?" he asked, panic creeping into his voice. "I need space," I said. "Real space. Not the kind where we pretend this isn't happening." He stood up, reached for me, then stopped himself. Like he wasn't sure what he was allowed to do anymore. "I'm trying," he said. "I know," I replied, "but trying without changing still hurts." I stayed at Maya's place that night. She didn't say "I told you so." She just handed me a blanket, a glass of water, and let me sit in silence until I finally said, "I don't think I can keep loving him like this." She nodded. "That doesn't mean you don't love him. It means you love yourself too." Julian texted, then called, then texted again, "I miss you. I don't want to lose you. Please come home." I stared at my phone for a long time before replying. "I can't be your secret anymore." His response took a while. "I'm scared." That was the most honest thing he'd said in weeks. So I wrote back the hardest truth I knew. "I'm scared too, but I'm already paying the price. You're just afraid of starting." When I went back to the apartment the next day, we sat across from each other like strangers who knew each other's bodies better than their futures. "I don't know if I can do this," he said. "Not yet." I felt something in me finally settle. "Then I can't stay," I replied. We didn't scream. We didn't cry much. We held each other for a long time, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air one last time. "I love you," he whispered. "I know," I said. But love without courage becomes a cage. When I walked out, my hands were shaking, but my chest felt strangely light. I didn't know if Julian would ever come out. I just knew I couldn't disappear while waiting. For the first few weeks after the breakup, I told everyone I was fine. And in some ways, I was. I slept better, ate regularly, started going to the gym again, not to punish myself, but because I wanted to feel present in my body instead of folded inward all the time. I posted pictures without thinking about who might see them. I laughed louder, took up space again. But grief doesn't always look like crying on the bathroom floor. Sometimes it looks like reaching for your phone at 11:47 p.m. because you just saw something dumb and funny and he would have laughed at it too. Sometimes it looks like missing the way someone knew you in private, even when that privacy was the problem. Julian didn't disappear completely. He respected the boundary, mostly. No late-night calls, no dramatic gestures. But every now and then, a message slipped through. I hope you're doing okay. I walked past your favorite coffee place today. I miss you. I never replied, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that love without action was just noise. 2 months passed, then 3. Life filled in around the empty space he left. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but steadily. I went on a few dates. Nothing serious. Nice guys, open guys, guys who reached for my hand without checking who was watching. It felt good. It also felt strange. Then, one afternoon, Julian showed up at my door. No warning, no text, just a knock that I recognized immediately. I froze with my hand on the doorknob. Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home. Another part, the part that still loved him, needed to see his face one more time to know who we were now. So I opened the door. He looked different, not worse, just raw. Like he'd peeled something back and hadn't quite learned how to wear his skin again. His hair was shorter. His eyes tired but clear in a way they hadn't been before. Hey, he said softly. Hey, I replied. We stood there, the silence heavy but not hostile. Can I come in? He asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He didn't touch anything when he walked in. Didn't sit until I gestured to the couch. Like he knew this space wasn't his anymore. I won't stay long, he said. I needed to tell you something in person. I crossed my arms, bracing myself. Okay. He took a breath, then another. I told my sister, he said. My heart skipped, but I didn't let it show. Told her what? About us, he said. About me. I nodded slowly. And? She didn't freak out, he said, almost incredulous. She hugged me, told me she'd known. Asked why I waited so long, I swallowed. I told my parents too, he continued. Not perfectly, not bravely, but honestly. I met his eyes then. My mom cried, he said, not because she was angry, because she was scared for me. My dad needed time. He still does. He looked at his hands. But they didn't stop loving me. I felt something twist inside my chest. Pride. Sadness. Relief. All tangled together. I should have done this sooner, he said. I know that now. I stayed quiet. I lost you because I was trying to keep my life intact instead of letting it be true, he went on, and I don't expect anything. I just couldn't live with myself if I didn't tell you I finally chose honesty. The room felt thick with everything we'd never said. I'm glad, I said finally, and I meant it. I really am. He looked up, hope flickering. Just for a second. But, I continued, gently, that doesn't mean we rewind. He nodded. Slowly. Like he'd expected that. I know, he said. I just needed you to know you weren't wrong. It wasn't you asking too much. It was me offering too little. That landed harder than any apology. We sat there for a while after that. No touching. Just shared history breathing between us. When he stood to leave, he paused at the door. You taught me what it costs to hide, he said. I won't forget that. I watched him walk away without chasing him. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I'd helped something begin, even if it wasn't ours. Later that night, I went on a date. Nothing dramatic. Just drinks. Easy conversation. A guy who asked questions and didn't flinch when I answered honestly. When he reached for my hand across the table, I let him. Not because Julian was gone, but because I finally understood this. Love that can't stand in the light isn't unfinished. It's unfinished you. And I was done waiting in the dark. A year later, I ran into Julian by accident. Not the dramatic, heart-stopping kind of accident. Just a quiet, ordinary collision in the produce aisle of a grocery store we both used to shop at. He was comparing avocados, I was reaching for the same ones. We froze. Then we laughed. The tension that used to live between us wasn't gone, but it was different. Softer, like an old scar you notice only when the weather changes. "How have you been?" he asked. "Good," I said. And for once, it wasn't a performance. He told me about his new apartment, about therapy, about learning how to answer questions without rehearsing first, about bringing a guy he was dating to his sister's wedding and surviving it. I told him about my work, about moving into a place with bigger windows, about a man named Oliver who liked holding my hand for no reason other than that he could. Julian smiled when I said that, not the tight smile from before, a real one. "I'm glad," he said. "You deserve that." "So do you," I replied. We hugged before parting. Brief. Warm. Complete. As I walked away, something surprised me. I didn't feel like I was closing a door. I felt like I'd already walked through it a long time ago. Later that night, Oliver asked me about my past relationships. I told him the truth. Not the sanitized version, not the bitter one, just the real one. "That sounds hard," he said. It was. I agreed, but it taught me something important. "What's that?" I thought about Julian, about myself, about the man I was when I believed love meant waiting quietly. "That you can love someone deeply," I said, "and still walk away if they're asking you to disappear." He nodded, squeezed my hand. "I'm really glad you didn't," he said. "So am I. Because love without a coming out isn't always doomed, but it is a test. Of patience, of self-worth, of how much light you're willing to live without. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't staying. It's choosing yourself loudly enough that the right kind of love can finally find you." I used to think closure was something two people gave each other, a final conversation, a clean ending, mutual understanding wrapped up neatly with a bow. Turns out, most of the time, closure is something you give yourself, quietly, long after the story stops being dramatic enough for anyone else to notice. A few months after that grocery store run-in, I found an old jacket while packing for a move, one I hadn't worn in ages. When I checked the pockets, my fingers brushed folded paper. A note, Julian's handwriting, slanted, careful. From the early days, back when everything still felt possible. "Don't let me disappear on you," it said. "If I ever do, remind me who I am." I sat on the floor with that note for a long time. Because here's the thing I hadn't fully admitted yet. Julian didn't just disappear on me. I disappeared on myself, trying to keep him comfortable. And forgiving him had been easier than forgiving that. That night, I didn't text him. I didn't spiral. I didn't romanticize what we'd been. I folded the note back up, thanked it for what it had taught me, and let it go. That felt bigger than any conversation we ever had. With Oliver, things weren't perfect, but they were honest. He knew my past. I knew his. There were no translations required, no edits made before stories left our mouths. When we fought, it was about dishes or schedules or stupid misunderstandings, not about whether I existed too loudly. One evening, months later, we were at a small get-together with his friends. Someone asked, casually, "So how did you two meet?" Oliver smiled and said, "I got lucky." And that was it. No pause, no calculation, no fear. On the walk home, I realized something that hit me out of nowhere. For the first time in my adult life, love felt boring in the best way. Steady, visible, unconditional. And that's when I finally understood the real lesson of loving someone who wasn't out yet. You can have compassion for someone's fear without volunteering to live inside it. You can support someone's journey without abandoning your own. And you can love someone deeply and still walk away when love starts asking you to disappear. Julian didn't fail because he was closeted. We failed because I stayed silent longer than my truth could survive. I don't regret loving him, not for a second, but I'm grateful I loved myself enough to leave. Because the right kind of love doesn't ask you to wait in the shadows. It reaches for you and doesn't let go when the light turns on.